Greater Than 0% is a 501c3 nonprofit that's on a mission to share stories of organizations from around the world that are changing lives. We have weekly episodes featuring amazing nonprofits and monthly episodes interviewing top business executives. You can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms.
So thanks everybody for tuning into this episode. Today we have Scott Meyer, who is the CEO of BenchmarkAI. Scott, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Can't wait.
All right. So we have some really hot topics that we're going to discuss on this episode that I'm excited to discuss. But before we get into it, what is BenchmarkAI?
Yeah, so BenchmarkAI is looking at how do we get really big public data and make sense of it using AI. And the first use case we approached was in the nonprofit sector, looking at the 990 forms. So nonprofits know that the 990 form is your annual tax return that's public. There's about 1.2 million 990s every year. And it's all public, but right now it's PDFs, right? So if you want to actually get information, you have to know exactly which organization you're looking for, download it, and then read it. If you want to compare, what's the average salary of a religious nonprofit director in Fargo, North Dakota, you have to download every nonprofit PDF, calculate manually, figure out what it is. So not very useful. So we thought, okay, this data is public, so let's make it actually useful. And that's a perfect use case for AI. So we created what's called benchmark990.com. It's live. People can go check it out. And essentially what it does is lets you search across all 990 forms, and you can drill down into salary, grants, people at an organization, top paid individuals. So the audience that's finding a lot of value from it is people who work with nonprofits primarily. So think like hiring firms, accountants, lawyers who are trying to figure out either what should we pay somebody, a lot of boards trying to figure out, are we paying enough or not enough? And then if you think about, I could actually see what's the salary of everybody in a community. I could then encourage them to apply for my position because they're underpaid, or they're in a similar area, or maybe they want to move to a different part of the country. So yeah, lots of power and just kind of making data public. Probably the most interesting thing was along the way we spawned a second company that's called Chipp.ai, CHIPP.ai. And the reason that happened is because when you use AI, you get charged every time people are asking questions. So we got our first bill and it was high, and we decided we need to not just give this stuff away for free. So we created a payment system where people can just pay per use. So you only pay when you're using it. And a bunch of developers downloaded the code, and we realized that the payment solution was actually a company as well. So yeah, BenchmarkAI is kind of this umbrella for these interesting explorations into what AI can do to make our organizations more resilient, more useful, and more efficient.
All right. Now I'm going to, because my day job is kind of relevant topics to discuss, but I'm going to ask some 101 questions before I do that. Why you? Why is this an area that you're passionate about?
I've spent my entire career helping people understand and use technology. So I'm a teacher at heart. My grandma taught shorthand back in the 60s in rural South Dakota. And, I got my start as a professor and then had a startup for a decade. And we actually taught people to use social media for business. And what I see right now with AI is this amazing opportunity for companies, for communities, for regions of the world to compete, even if they don't have the people or the talent in that place or in that company. AI really just gives you kind of superpowers to be more efficient. And it also, what studies have shown is it increases the floor. So for new employees, people who aren't as talented, it really ensures a level of quality that you can't always do. You're not always looking over someone's shoulder. So I'm really passionate about helping companies, especially in my community and my part of the world, like take advantage of that so that they can compete. Because I feel like if you don't, you're missing out on an opportunity. And so that's kind of why I'm passionate about it. And I love learning, and I think I'm pretty good at translating bright, shiny things into actual use cases. I have a chance to do that on my YouTube channel. So I run a blog and YouTube channel called 5 Minute AI. And I do 5 minutes or less, basically showing how to use AI for something within a company, not just this is new and cool, but actually here's how to use it. So I think that's been really successful to help people like get over that fear and just start.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Now, 101 questions. Let's ask a few basic ones. What is AI? Let's start there.
Yeah. I mean, AI is short for artificial intelligence. And I think the way people use it right now is anything where you're getting insights from a machine, you could say, is like a really simple definition. Um, if you think about in the past, you would ask like a mathematical question, or you would ask Google to find any page that has this word. The difference now is it's essentially able to look at all the information in the past and basically predict what you're going to want. And so you can have a conversation with it essentially. And so that's kind of the difference, I think, between just a machine like Google versus artificial intelligence, which is more conversational in that information exchange.
All right, next one. What is ML or machine learning, and how is it different?
Yeah, machine learning. So machine learning is essentially the process to teach the AI. So machine learning is how you would train software. It's also machine learning is help software get better, right? So a company like Google might use machine learning to improve their search engine, even if it's not technically artificial intelligence. So I'd say that's like the workout to create the body at the end.
All right. And then double clicking into AI, generative AI is a very hot topic over the past 18 or so months. What is generative AI, and how is it different, or what aspect of
Yeah.
AI does it include?
Yeah, generative AI, I think when people talk about generative AI, it's essentially when the AI is creating something new, like generating it.
Hmm.
And the way that you think about this is, it's not pulling a sentence or a previous image from somewhere in the past, right? It's actually creating something new based on all this information. So a lot of people worry with AI that, if I ask a question or if I upload a spreadsheet, someone else might get my answer or they might get my data. That's not how it works. It's actually predicting, what is the image from the noise, or what is the next word from all of the tokens or characters that would be typically typed in. So it's creating something new based on a lot of prediction. And I think that's what's the new thing that caught fire in the past year is this ability. It feels magical, which is why people like it, because it is creating something that wasn't there before.
Yeah. And then there's another aspect of generative AI called foundational models. What is a foundational model, and how does that translate to benchmark 990?
Yeah. So all of the different AI tools run on a model. Essentially, they're training their software to predict what to do. So
Hmm.
a model is going to pull in examples, and then those examples will help it predict what to give you when you ask a question. So there's a lot of different models out there, and they're different based on what they're trained on, but also then like the use, what you can use it for, and if it's free or not, things like that. So Facebook, for example, has a model called Llama that's open source, and so that's something that you can use without having to pay for. Probably the most famous example is OpenAI has a model
Hmm.
for ChatGPT, and so that's been trained on basically everything on the internet before the end of what was it 2022 or actually the end of 2021. So if you imagine all the text on the internet, it basically you put all that into the model, and then it says, okay, when you say, you know, what's the best thing to do in Fargo? It's going to predict based on all the things that's read what a good answer is for that. What other models? And then there's like graphic models too. So what you see something like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or Lexica, they're trained on models that take all these images and artwork, and then it creates a bunch of noise. And then when you ask a prompt, you say like, here I want a cowboy riding a spaceship. It's going to pull a new image together. So models is essentially the library that it's looking at, the information it's gathered. And now there's kind of a big bifurcation where some companies, people are creating their own models, which is very expensive and hard to do. Most people just build on top of existing models. So
Right.
Benchmark 990, we build on top of OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT. So that means that just like typing in ChatGPT, you can get the same answers. But what we do is we add specific data on top of it. And so when you ask a question on Benchmark 990, you're first getting the answers from 1.2 million tax returns, but you can still just ask a question and it'll understand that because it's trained on that chat gpt model. So you can say, what are the top 10 largest universities in a certain state, or what are the top 10 religious nonprofits in the US, and it'll
Hmm.
understand what you're asking but then pull the data from the tax returns. So yeah, so kind of two levels, right? Like the
Yeah.
foundational model, and then you can add your own data. So a lot of companies are doing that as well, like adding in financial information, customer service, HR, whatever it might be.
And is that considered in your example, your organization's intellectual property and how you differentiate and how you're able to charge for a service is the additive aspects that you're building into Benchmark 990, for example.
Yeah, in our case, the data is open, right? So like anyone could access the tax return data.
Hmm.
What we've done is made it easy to find information from that data. So our value,
Yep.
like what we're essentially charging for, is the ability to compare and create insights from that.
Right.
Because most people can't download 1.2 million rows onto their Excel sheet. And even if they did, to be able to then ask a natural language question to get those answers, like won't happen. So that's kind of where our value is. But I think that's where a lot of companies are trying to figure out, how do we not just become a pretty interface for ChatGPT? How do we actually add value, which might be our own data, like you said, or it could be additional, interesting information or combining tech stacks, like in our case. Yeah.
Yep. So I want to get to how this applies to nonprofits and
Yep.
other organizations that want to use uh, generative AI to help make their organizations run smoother, or to get more information, to make data driven decisions, or to help with like social media posting, something
Yeah.
simple. So how have you seen nonprofit, the industry, the sector of nonprofits start to adopt Gen AI, and where do you see it being most used now? And then we could get kind of to your future visions.
Yeah, so through 5 Minute AI, the website is 5min.ai. I actually work with organizations to help them integrate AI. So I've kind of gotten a front row seat to what people do and what they maybe should do. What I see most people doing is using ChatGPT, because it's probably the most well known and maybe the easiest, which is great. ChatGPT is probably my favorite tool. There's a lot of other ones out there that get more specific that I think are helpful as well. Um, AI is really good for text heavy work. Anything that is sort of laborious and maybe detail oriented, it's going to be really good for that. And I always tell organizations the framework you need to have in mind is the AI sandwich, which is everything starts with a human, the top of the sandwich, right? The middle, the meat, is the AI doing the work. And then at the bottom, you have the human again, editing and improving it. So I
Right.
think the biggest disappointment people have is, they type something in like, write me a paper in ChatGPT, and you're not giving it any direction and it's not going to be accurate. So what you need to think about is this sandwich idea, where you're giving a little bit of information and then it's spitting something out, you edit it, give it back, and you kind of just keep this back and forth approach, which people call like multi-shot prompting. So essentially asking multiple questions instead of just one question. That works really well. So the way I'm seeing people use it is getting ideas. It's really good for strategy, like what should we do for XYZ?
Hmm.
My favorite use case for nonprofits is grant writing. If you
Yep.
think about what's one of the most boring things to do, it's like writing grants. You're saying the same information you've already said, and now you're saying it in 2,000 characters instead of 3,000, and now you're doing it for like this including this new program. And so what you can do, I have a great video on this that you can link in the show notes, that is a 5 minute AI video on how to write a grant using ChatGPT. And the key is essentially you have to tell ChatGPT, here's what I want it to look like. So here's an example of a good grant.
Hmm.
Now add this information in, and then it'll spit out the information the way you want, right? Like if you don't tell it what a good example is, it's just going to try its best. I always say AI is kind of like a puppy. It just really wants to please you. So it's just going to try stuff. But if you can say, here's an example of our past grant, write it like this, but make it 2,000 characters and make sure to include this new project that does XYZ. It's going to be really good and really big time saver. And then you're still going to copy paste that into Google Docs and do a final pass, probably
Right.
edit, right? But what I have found is, I've been able to apply for grants for a few organizations in about 60 to 90 minutes. And that's using past grant applications, their annual report, or their website as the kind of the example, right? Because
Yeah.
here's how we talk. Like it's not only details, but also what's the tone? How does this organization express itself? Because if you just ask without any example, it's just going to talk however it tries to. So I think grants a great example. Social media communications, any of that is great. Taking a video transcript and then having it reword that into different formats and sizes is great. Like what we're doing right now, I do podcasting, and every time I take the transcript from the podcast, I put it in ChatGPT, ask it to summarize it for YouTube in less than 2,000 characters, ask it to write a Twitter post, ask it to write a LinkedIn post, and it'll change the tone, it'll change the style. I'll say, add lots of emojis. And the more you do this, it'll actually learn your tone, right? If you're doing
Yeah.
this sample model, I like to include lots of emojis, short paragraphs, headlines, and then the next time I do it, I don't have to tell it that again. Like, it's starting to write the way I want. So you really are creating, like a virtual assistant or a TA or like whatever your metaphor is, but it's like an augmentation. And so for nonprofits, it's like, what sector is understaffed and under-resourced? It's usually nonprofits. The ability to write marketing content, grants, like that's making real money, getting donations in with less time. And I think that's just like a no-brainer. Those are a few of my like ChatGPT tips. I love sending people to gamma.app, which is GAMMA.app. It creates PowerPoints with like a simple prompt. It looks beautiful, and I think about all the presentations people make to their board or their donors. Like, it'll do it in seconds, right? And that's
Yeah.
a huge time saving, and it's probably better than what you can design anyway.
Yeah.
Um, if you are a designer, you're making graphics, like there's a lot of power in Midjourney or even like Adobe Firefly to create blog post graphics, newsletter graphics, billboard images, whatever it might be. So whatever your kind of area is, you could imagine a use case. But those are a few of my favorite. I'm also in the midst, like with a startup, we're doing a lot of legal documents. It's
Yeah.
great to understand stuff. I can copy paste a contract in and just say, explain this to me like I'm 5, and it'll just summarize it. Or if I have a question about some concept, it'll explain it to me in a different way. So I think that's really fun too. Like, my background is as a teacher, and it's to think about the ability to learn whatever you want in whatever style or language or skill level you're at is incredibly powerful. It's like being able to ask your teacher, like, teach this to me, in the tone of famous, Richard Feynman, right? Or teach it to
Yeah.
me as a
Yeah.
fifth grader. And it's kind of mind blowing that it takes what we had on the internet and just personalizes it to each person.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like some of the immediate questions that people have when they realize that new things could be generated, whether it's images or content, is, will I get in trouble for plagiarizing or copywriting? How have you seen that play out, or is it still there's not really much, I guess, legal, I don't know, like
Yeah, there's a
formulas
few
built
cases
around
now
it?
that have
Yeah.
there's a few cases now that have gone through, which is helpful because it's obviously very fast moving, faster than the law system. But
Yeah.
basically, the takeaway is that anything you generate with generative AI can be used commercially. It's like free use, but you can't copyright it unless you're changing it. So if you do the AI sandwich, you can copyright it. Most people don't even care about copyrighting their stuff, right? Like, essentially, if Nike creates an image with AI, they can't download the image off of Midjourney and then put their trademark on it and it's theirs. They would have
Mhm.
to take it into Photoshop, change it, and then it would be theirs. Same thing
Right.
kind of with text, like anything it spits out you can use. You probably couldn't, I mean, you could publish it as a book, but you couldn't copyright the book if it was straight from ChatGPT. But if you
Right.
took that text, edited it, and then it's yours. So there's not a big issue legally. I think the bigger issue is corporate or within an org. Like, what's the policy and what's the standards? Um, you know, uh, People who are lawyers or others who have like a really small barrier to mistakes, like, want to be really careful, right? Because
Right.
AI can hallucinate, can make stuff up, it can say things in a weird way. But for most of us, we make mistakes anyway. It's probably as good or better than us, and um, as long as you're doing that sandwich and reading at the end, you're going to be fine. So I think the bigger thing is create a culture of AI innovation. And the way I recommend organizations do that is just have a shared Google document once or twice a month. Meet with other people on your team who are using AI, encourage people to use AI, but then have them share the prompts or the things they're saying and using on the Google Doc so you can
Yeah.
learn from one another. Because I think the biggest problem is people are using it, but they're too afraid to share or tell people. And then it's like you're not getting better, right? So I think if
Yeah.
people are willing to share, have kind of like best practice doc, the things that we say, then you can move from using AI personally to like having a workflow in your org. And that's kind of what I help a lot of businesses do with 5 Minute AI is move it from a cool shiny to this is how we use it within our marketing or within our strategy sessions or within our coding or design.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This is exciting. The future. What does a nonprofit look like 2 decades from now that has fully embraced all of the new technologies that are out now and will come out in the next 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, I would say too, like 20 years, it's so hard to know. I mean, I think
Yeah.
about what was basically like the
20 years ago. Yeah.
dot-com crash. And I guess, the seeds were there. Amazon existed, but no social media yet, none of
Yeah.
that. So I think the trend is going to be, it's going to be local and specific. So right now, most of our AI is general. So you think about like GPT is like general, like that's what the G is, right? Um, I think over time we'll have more tools and training that is just for nonprofits in the environmental space, right? And then you can have some kind of AI tool that's going to speak more specifically to that. Um, Honestly, I would say what I'm seeing and what the data shows is that there's about a 30 to 40% increase in productivity by using AI.
Hmm.
And the improvement in quality also is about 15 to 20%. And so, what
Well,
you're probably going to see is that you can do more with less talented or less experienced people, which should allow for more nonprofits to create great marketing, to create more, communications, to apply for more grants with fewer people. That
yeah.
should actually be able to be done now. I just think that within 2 years, you're going to see that kind of go through the world, and those who embrace it and use it are going to grow faster and be able
Yeah.
to get more done. So, and it should, it'll be interesting to see what that does to wages. And I suspect that, a sliver of the population, like the top 10 or 20%, will get paid more because they're able to use AI effectively and create amazing work. And then a lot of the other 80% who haven't fully embraced kind of become similar, right? Because if you have a little bit more experience than me, but we're both kind of using AI, like we're probably at about the same level. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about, but I think nonprofits should start now, figure out how it works for them, and you're just worst case you're learning and you're going to be better off. Almost everything is free to try, and it's going to save you time.
Oh, wow. Do you have some examples of nonprofits that you've worked with, maybe more recently, and how you've kind of helped them? I know you have your YouTube, so you can't track all of the people that you've impacted and
Yeah.
supported, but I'm wondering if you have any pretty solid examples of folks you've worked with.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a nonprofit here in Fargo, TNT Kids Fitness. So they help promote fitness for people who are less mobile and just encouraging physical activity. And so the grant example I do on the video is with them, right? Like they were applying for a Bremer grant, and we basically said, okay, let's take previous grants and what's on your website, and then apply using this information. So that was a great example of like me being able to do that pretty quick and effectively.
Hmm.
And them having big payouts. So like when you start getting tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars, and it only takes you a few hours, like you're going to embrace AI really quick, right?
Yeah.
Even finding grants, right? Like being able to kind of, you can upload
Hmm.
PDFs to a tool like chat.pdf, and it is able to summarize it and find information. So that's another great example of like being able to find things and pull information out quickly. Yeah, I think universities are obviously a lot of them are nonprofit, and that they're being quickly disrupted. I think the big change here is like how you assess, and that's one thing that grant givers are going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
Like if everybody's applying with AI, like how do we then parse it? It's pretty interesting. Homework obviously for universities is a huge change, and I think every class is going to have to change to be like a flipped classroom where you're doing homework outside, but then in class you're actually like critically thinking and talking, and not just like coming up with answers. And yeah, so I mean, those are a few kind of like random ideas off the top.
Yeah. Wow. So engagement. What type of engagement does Benchmark AI look for from the public, and where can they get engaged
Yeah.
and find you?
Yeah, you can just go to benchmark990.com, and what we do is, you get credits for free to try it out, and you can do salary benchmarks and run reports. If you like it, you'll run out of tokens eventually out of your credits, and then you can pay per use. I think the thing we're looking for right now is like who's the right audiences for it, because our hypothesis is smaller nonprofits kind of use this information once or twice a year, maybe when they hire, maybe when they consider raises. Larger nonprofits, family foundations are using this more frequently to
Mm.
assess, who they're giving grants to. And then professionals like a hiring agency would use this quite frequently. So would love feedback, so if you want, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm Mr. Scott Meyer, or just look for Scott Meyer in Fargo and you'll find me. And, um, I think any feedback or interest would be great, and curious how you might use it. So that's kind of the stage we're at, is just seeing what people do with it.
Yeah. Well, so folks that are listening, if Gen AI is something that you've wanted to use for your nonprofit or organization, depending on who's listening right now, reach out to Scott and pick his brain and look at his YouTube channel with the 5 minute. I think the 5 minutes is a very low commitment, and I think that one of the reasons why people maybe haven't taken the plunge or dove into the Gen AI space is because it sounds very overwhelming and they don't know where to start. But I think 5 minutes is a great starting point.
Yeah, and I think what people underestimate is that you know the AI tools are language tools, and so it's
Exactly.
actually easier. You think about when you first Googled, if you can remember that, if you're old like us, you had to almost figure out how to ask a question the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. Like it's literally how you would talk to someone, and you can
Yep.
just use that. So I actually think it's easier for beginners. It's more intimidating, I think, but it's easier to actually do because it's just natural language, which is, you'll hear natural language processing. That's exactly what this is it's allowing us to use what we do best, which is talk, and just use that as a way to talk to a computer instead of a human.
Oh, all right. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that you want to share that maybe we missed, or anything you want to leave us with before we end this episode? I feel like we covered a lot.
Oh, there's so much. Yeah, we did it great. I think I talk about the 5 minute framework as a way to get started. So I always encourage people, like, when you hear about a new tool or you're trying to get started, like, take 5 minutes to try it out yourself. And then if it seems interesting, take another 5 minutes to apply it to a use case. And then if that works, I recommend people do another 5 minutes to teach it to somebody else. So a lot of times I say, try it, apply it, amplify it. Because I think it's fun to learn about this stuff and you use it once or twice and it's really fun. But unless you apply it to a use case, you won't keep using it. And often if you don't show it to somebody else, like, you'll kind of forget about it. So
Yeah.
that's why I encourage people to have like that shared Google Doc or just a learning partner, and I think everybody, these are sort of picks and shovels, like a lot of these tools are meant to be used to solve other problems. So just having the tool is not an answer, but using it to write a grant or to write a social media post or to create artwork for your blog, like, that's real use cases that can save time and just get past the blank page problem, the writer's block. I think AI is
Yeah.
great at getting us past, like, what should I do, and get you towards, I don't like that, here's what it should be. Gets us into like editing mode rather than creation mode.
Yep. Wow. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely share all the links that you shared in the show notes below. But folks that are listening, reach out if you have any additional questions to Scott. And yeah, thanks again for your time.
Great to see y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Greater Than 0%. To find more episodes or to have your organization featured on the podcast, you can find us at gtzp.org on your preferred streaming or social media platforms. Find your cause with Greater Than 0%.